opinion that.
Who wins and how?
I'm going Benn early, Eubank late. I struggle to pick a winner on points. So that
it'd be interesting to see what kind of Conor comes out, because I've seen him being really aggressive in the interviews and stuff, and Eubank's been really relaxed. I think that Eubank just could have the edge with a bit of boxing ability, just like staying on back foot, and if depending on Conor, if he's been inactive, and unless he really closes it, he might get emotionally overtaken. I'm leaning towards Eubank a minute.
Points.
Yeah, Eubank's the bigger the better, and beating with the better fighters, more ring craft. Conor Benn's unproven yet.
Points or stoppage?
If Conor Benn comes out, he says, I think.
Eubank Jr. has always had a good chin, but then he did get stopped. So he can be hurt, he can be stopped. And if Conor hits him, there's every chance he could stop him. But it's certainly a very, very intriguing one.
What's your prediction for it?
I fancy Conor.
Eubank says he'll retire if Benn beats him. Can you see where that thought process comes from? Obviously Conor stepping up 2 weights, the amount of bad blood there's been.
Yeah, maybe then you just don't know. Maybe where does he go from there if Conor beats him? I'm not trying to say Conor's any less of a, but yeah, Chris is obviously the guy who should beat him because he's a lot heavier, maybe more seasoned. But it's definitely a 50-50 fight in my eyes. I think Conor's going to beat him. So yeah, you can see where that thought process comes from. But who knows? I know Chris likes to play poker a lot, so maybe it comes.
As I said, my only prediction is I'd have originally said Conor, but I can't now because of his inactivity. So I've got to lean towards Chris.
Stoppage, points. I've heard a lot of people saying before 6 rounds.
I think regardless of whichever way the fight goes, I don't think it'll go the distance.
I think Eubank might just have a little bit of edge. I just feel like Eubank.
I think his size?
Yeah, size difference. He's a welterweight, he's a middleweight. But they've then also got the rehydration clause in that as well, haven't they? So that could play an effect. I think it's going to be interesting. I reckon Eubank edges it.
I think it's going to be a very good fight. Conor has punching power chances. Chris is the bigger guy, so you give Chris the advantage going in because he's a bigger guy. But Conor does have exceptional punching power, so it's going to be a great fight. I think Chris should win the fight. I think Chris should outbox him, outsmart him, but he will have to be smart early because Conor is a great puncher.
I mean, pound for pound, Conor Benn, no question. But up at middleweight, both guys can crack. I think this is a 6-round shootout. I think Conor Benn will come out in the opening bell and try and rip Eubank to pieces.
How are they going to be able to say they both?
Conor Benn can't control his emotions.
No.
He's joking.
He's going to have to try.
That's why he's going to be a thriller, because someone will get chinned. And it could be inside, it could be Hagler Hearn style. Just absolutely going at it, and it'll be electric.
Who's going to get the edge for speed?
Conor, every day of the week.
Well, what's your prediction for it? Inside 6 rounds?
Inside 6 rounds.
What about a round prediction?
3 rounds. Fourth round, Conor Benn knockout.
Just give me my opinion on who's going to win the fight. I think Conor Benn for me is the favourite, just because youth, power, speed, hungrier. He's got a brilliant team around him. I'm not sure who's training Eubank for this fight. He seems to switch training teams quite a lot. So I think for me, Conor's the favourite on paper.
Proof in the pudding that says Conor Benn punches harder than me at 154. He's had 2 fights at 154 and hasn't had a knockdown, never mind anything else. So if Conor wants to portray that and draw confidence from that and try and plant a seed in Chris's head, then so be it. But like I said, I'll stand on what I say. I've always been a better fighter than Conor Benn. I'm a better fighter than Conor Benn now.
When Conor Benn charged at you on the pitch.
Honestly, a swear down, not at all.
Not at all?
Look at Eddie's reaction versus mine.
You did look chilled, I've got to be honest, because we just talked about your personality.
I think I stuck my hand out, which you would do, taking a step back, and was going to crack him. And then
I was going to crack him. You didn't stop smiling either, so you didn't flinch. And yeah, Eddie Hills did look worried.
Eddie turned round like the guy in the playground, like he always is, starts pointing and laughing. Anyway, it was funny. I enjoyed it.
But I think with Chris, this is purely business. This is purely business. I don't think he quite likes him very much.
No.
But I'm telling you now, it's a good thing that Conor's in Spain. because imagine them two bumping into each other on a London high street on a Sunday afternoon.
We don't need that, do we?
No one needs that, no one wants it, but it's inevitable. So you literally have to navigate your way through these camps and keep these two boys away from each other, because
keep the lid on.
I've been there with this kind of animosity, and I've been there with this kind of domestic rivalry. It eats away at you. It's not nice.
No.
It literally eats away at you. It's on your mind daily, and you just it gets to it's an intense build-up. Like I say, I've been.
I don't. I think I think Chris is leaps and bounds ahead of Conor. You know, his experience, the guys he's been in with. You know, take away the weight, because Chris is obviously going to be disadvantaged in there with the weight as well. But just ability, boxing skill set.
I just think Conor Benn's going to win. Too young, too fresh, and although, listen, Eubank, it took a lot for him to come back after getting viciously knocked out by Liam Smith, to come back and beat Liam. I just think the fight's happening at the right time for Conor Benn. I think the fight's happening at the right time, and I favour Conor Benn in the fight.
Yeah.
I think Eubank Jr. is good for boxing. Genuinely, I think Chris Jr. is good for boxing. I think that if he was promoted by a Frank Warren or an Eddie Hearn back in the day when he turned pro, he would be an even bigger star than what he is now, because of how he is. He's funny, like he's mildly. He's quite funny, isn't he, Eubank Jr. He speaks well. But yeah, I think he's good for boxing. But I just think Conor Benn's going to.
I think Chris Eubank Jr. has to start the favourite. He's the bigger guy of the two. He's been the more tested of the two. He's boxed at a higher level. Conor Benn has had his troubles outside of the ring with the two foul test that put him inactive. I mean, I know he had a couple of low-key fights, but not very active, not as active as he'd like to have been. He was boxing at 147. This is now up at 160. Anyone that will think, well, it's not that much of a jump. Trust me, it is. For boxers, it's a huge jump, And Chris is a guy coming down from 168. He boxed George Groves at 168 in the World Super Series. And, he boxed him at 168. He come back down to 160.
I never really fancied him at super middle, though, did you?
No, I didn't fancy him at super middle. He was too small against George Groves. We could see that. 160 is his weight. It is tough there. They put a rehydration clause of 10 pounds in there, but I don't think that'll make much of a difference, because 10 pounds is quite a lot of fluid to put back into the... Chris has to start the favourite because of where he's positioned, but he's getting older now, and Conor Benn is young, and there's a lot on the line for him, and I think it's a coming-of-age fight for Conor. We'll see now just how good he is. Is he good enough? Can he compete at that level? Because Chris has always sort of been there or thereabouts, world level, so it's an interesting fight.
The problem with Eubank's record is this.
I'd have said Conor Benn, so I'd have to lean towards Chris. For what reason? Because his last fight, I wasn't impressed. But he's been more active, he's been busier, and so therefore you've got to lean towards. I would lean towards Chris for that reason. If Conor's career had carried on the way it carried on, then I'd say Conor, because I think he was one of the fastest developing fighters I'd ever seen in the UK at that particular time. So I just think that timeout. I think we've lost an important period in Conor's development as a fighter.
The fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn is heating up, and top fighters are giving their thoughts. Darren Till thinks it's a real 50-50 war. He says Conor Benn's power is dangerous and could turn the fight into a nightmare for Eubank, but he also wonders if Eubank's talk about retirement is real or just hype to get attention. Liam Smith isn't impressed with Benn. He says Benn's power is overrated and that he hasn't done much at the higher weight. Smith says Benn has only had 2 fights at 154 pounds and didn't really hurt anyone. Smith believes he has always been the better fighter and that Benn still needs to prove he belongs at the top level. Roy Jones Jr., who has trained Eubank, sees the fight as a chess match that could turn wild fast. He thinks Eubank has the edge with size and skill, but warns that one big shot from Benn could end the fight suddenly. Roy says Eubank must fight smart from the start. One mistake could be the end. The big question, will Eubank use his experience to win, or will Benn shock the world with his power? Don't blink. This one's war ready.